douchebaggers, birthers, deathers, those on the outer fringe are on the rise. It should come as no surprise then that almost a decade after they all but faded from view, anti-government militias are also on the rise, armed with weapons, residing in training camps. Hate groups in this country are multiplying, and as one law enforcement official puts it now, all it's lacking is a spark. A new report out from the Southern Poverty Law Center shows that right-wing militias, ideologically driven tax defiers, and so-called sovereign citizens are materializing in significant numbers. One federal agent noting, you see people buying into what they're saying. It's primed to grow. What's priming the movement's growth? An ailing economy, of course, but one key difference between militia groups in the 90s and what's fueling actions now, the face of the federal government. The enemy that almost all parts of the extreme right see as the primary threat to freedom is now black. Another key factor, a changing demographic. Contributing to the racial animus have been fears on the far right about the consequences of Latino immigration. But hate groups are not the only problem. Federal authorities are also focusing on those who may be contemplating politically charged assaults and acting alone. The FBI's Lone Wolf Initiative, launched to prevent single acts of hate-fueled violence, like the fatal shooting of 3 Pittsburgh police officers, or the killing of a black security guard at the Holocaust Museum in D.C., or, of course, the assassination of Dr. George Tiller. Joining us now, Mark Potok, the director of the Intelligence Project for the Southern Poverty Law Center. Thanks for your time tonight, sir.
And thanks for having me, Keith. I appreciate it.
These recent events that I mentioned, don't they prove that we're already seeing the kind of violence happen that's sort of being predicted retroactively?
It absolutely does. I mean, you know, the spate of real terrorist incidents that we've seen since Obama's election are quite remarkable. You know, and of course, this was the very kind of activity that was talked about in the infamous Department of Homeland Security report that was so pilloried by Republicans and others on the right. You know, as it turns out, of course, the report was really prescient. It was completely accurate.
That report, mocked as you suggest by conservatives, what is going to happen for the right to take that sort of stuff seriously and to view this from a national security point of view as opposed to a political opportunistic point of view?
It is hard to say, because I think that the reaction to every one of these reports, a number of law enforcement reports and now our own, has been that somehow this is an attempt to defame conservatives or people opposed to abortion or veterans. And of course, none of those things are true. You know, the reality is that, you know, we're seeing it in the town hall meetings, we're seeing it in some of the other reactions to Obama, the deathers and so on, as you've suggested. You know, the reality is that there is an immense amount of totally false propaganda out there, and much of it is coming from the militias or similar groups. You know, what's just astounding is that sort of responsible Republicans and other politicians and commentators seem to be incapable of rejecting this. You know, so there, I think, really is a line between the people you see, or some of the people you see at town hall meetings, amongst the deathers and so on, and the ideology that we're seeing being reborn with the militias.
As this story in St. Louis, I guess it was, begins to unravel about Kenneth Gladney, the conservative supposed town hall protester who claims he was beaten up, and now there is videotape that shows him walking when he said he couldn't walk any further. Does that actually fit into the subjects of your concern, or is that a separate issue? Is the false almost martyring of these of people involved in this, is that part of this equation?
Well, in a sense it is, in the sense that, you know, there is just an immense amount of false propaganda out there. There are people saying things that they know are not true. You know, there's outright lying being done by commentators and politicians and in people in positions of real authority. So, you know, I think the battle has come down, I think, as you well know, to a kind of calling out of these people. They've got to be shown for what they are, which is people who are unwilling to deal with reality. You know, so when somebody gets on television and says, you know, or suggests that FEMA is running a secret series of concentration camps around the country, you know, that person has to be isolated and called out in the very same way that the birthers have been over the last couple of weeks. I think that really is the nexus. You know, who's to say whether that person was explicitly associated with the militia or not? I certainly don't know that, and I'm not suggesting it, but it's those kinds of ideas that make the militias thrive.
Mark Potok of the Southern Poverty Law Center, as always, deeply appreciated. Thank you for your time, sir.